Imagine a world where death lurks around every corner. A single bite or a cough can mean your doom. Where medical science is limited and fear of disease runs rampant. Welcome to the terrifying reality of the 6th century AD, when a mysterious illness began sweeping across the vast territories of the Byzantine Empire, leaving behind a trail of misery and death. This was no ordinary epidemic. It was a horrifying spectacle of human suffering, the likes of which the world had rarely seen, and it all started with the arrival of an innocent-looking ship. The year was 541 AD, and peace was a distant memory in the troubled reign of the Byzantine Emperor Justinian I. The once proud empire, inheritor of the glories of ancient Rome, was locked in a brutal struggle to reclaim lost territories from the Persians. But this war would be the least of their worries for long. On the bustling docks of Constantinople, the capital of the Eastern Roman Empire, a merchant vessel had just arrived laden with exotic goods from distant lands. Among its precious cargo, however, were tiny stowaways that would soon unleash a nightmare upon the unsuspecting populace. Fleas carrying the bacterium Yersinia pestis, the cause of the Bubonic plague, had hitched a ride on rats, hiding in the sacks of grain imported from Egypt. With the ship's arrival, these sinister passengers would begin their sinister mission, infecting humans and wreaking havoc on the city. Life in Constantinople was bustling and vibrant, much like any modern metropolis. The streets teemed with people going about their daily routines. Merchants hawked their wares in the marketplace. Soldiers patrolled the ramparts, keeping the city safe from invaders. But the idyllic atmosphere was shattered with the emergence of an ominous chill in the air. Soon, the city's inhabitants would learn that this was no ordinary cold snap. It was a harbinger of a horrifying pestilence that would soon engulf the city, turning it into a graveyard of unimaginable proportions. As the plague took hold, a wave of terror swept through Constantinople. The realization dawned on the terrified citizens that they were facing an enemy that was invisible, elusive, and merciless. They watched in horror as their fellow citizens fell victim to the disease, succumbing to its terrifying grip. Among the first to fall was the city's livestock, which perished in droves. Then the humans began dropping like flies, and so began the horrifying ordeal of the Justinian Plague, named after the emperor who would survive it. At first, the victims were mostly soldiers returning from campaigns in the Middle East. These brave men, who had fought valiantly for their empire, now found themselves stricken by a foe that knew no mercy. But as the weeks passed, the plague's reach expanded, casting its sinister shadow over all segments of society. The relentless march of the disease spared no one. The rich and powerful, as well as the poor and powerless, all fell prey to its merciless grasp. The story of how the plague actually started is murky. Historians believe it likely emerged in Central Asia, possibly in China, then moved along trade routes. But exactly how it arrived in Egypt remains unknown. What is known is that when the disease reached Alexandria, a major trading hub, it quickly spread to other Mediterranean ports. The first recorded outbreak was in 541 AD, when an unnamed pestilence ravaged the city of Erl, modern-day Ailés, in southern France. From there, it rapidly spread north and east, eventually reaching Constantinople. The symptoms of the Justinian Plague were nothing short of terrifying. Victims experienced sudden fevers, chills, and weakness, followed by excruciating pain in their lymph nodes. Cailled boys, which grew to the size of an apple. As the plague progressed, delirium set in, leading to convulsions and ultimately death. Those unfortunate enough to succumb to the disease were often dead within a week. And to add to the horror, the streets of Constantinople became a macabre gallery of suffering. The corpses were left unburied, creating a breeding ground for rats and further spreading the disease. The stench of death hung heavy in the air, a grim reminder of the plague's unrelenting grip on the city. The people of Constantinople were trapped in a nightmare from which there seemed to be no escape. The relentless advance of the plague had turned their world upside down, leaving them to confront the harsh realities of a society teetering on the brink of annihilation. With the healthcare system overwhelmed and the streets transformed into scenes of a horror show, the citizens were left to fend for themselves in a desperate battle against the invisible enemy. In the face of such overwhelming despair, people turned to religion for solace. They prayed fervently to God for deliverance from the scourge that had befallen them. Yet despite their fervent pleas, the plague continued its merciless rampage. offering no respite to the tormented souls of Constantinople. As the death toll mounted, a sense of hopelessness and fatalism began to grip the city. People came to terms with the grim reality that death could strike at any moment, sparing none in its relentless pursuit. The specter of mortality loomed large over every interaction, casting a pall over even the most mundane aspects of life. Fear became a constant companion, lurking in the shadows of every darkened alley and echoing in the vacant stares of those who had lost loved ones to the plague. The vibrant community that had once thrived in Constantinople was now fragmented by the chilling grip of death. Friends and neighbors who had once shared laughter and companionship were now separated by the boundaries of life and death. The plague had become a cruel divider, separating the living from the dead and leaving behind a legacy of grief and solitude. But amidst this grim tapestry of suffering, a flicker of hope still remained. For a while, the plague had cast its shadow over the empire. It had not extinguished the spirit of humanity entirely. Acts of kindness and compassion emerged as beacons of light in the encroaching darkness. Neighbors and strangers alike banded together, offering support and solace to those afflicted by the disease. They shared what little food and supplies they had and cared for the sick, demonstrating the enduring strength of the human spirit in the face of adversity. Despite the plague's relentless assault, the resilience of the human spirit shone through. Medical practitioners, though limited by the knowledge of their time, made valiant efforts to combat the disease. They developed treatments and remedies, albeit with limited success, driven by their unwavering commitment to alleviate human suffering. While the answers to curing the plague remained elusive, these tireless individuals offered a glimmer of hope in an otherwise hopeless situation. Justinian himself managed to avoid the plague until 542 when he contracted it aboard his ship. Miraculously, he survived, but the plague continued to ravage the empire for years, periodically returning in waves of infection. To combat the disease, authorities resorted to drastic measures such as closing granaries to starve out the rats or burning contaminated grain. However, these efforts proved largely ineffective in stemming the tide of the plague. As the outbreak peaked in Constantinople, the city's population was decimated. Estimates suggest that nearly half the city's inhabitants perished, leaving behind a haunting landscape of deserted streets and silent homes. The plague's impact extended far beyond the immediate loss of life, leaving an indelible mark on the social, economic, and political fabric of the empire. Emperor Justinian, determined to revive his empire, attempted to address the crisis through the introduction of new laws and regulations. However, these measures were met with resistance from the populace, who viewed them as burdensome impositions on their already dire circumstances. The weight of the plague's aftermath pressed heavily on the shoulders of the survivors, hindering their ability to fully recover from the catastrophe. Moreover, the plague had profound implications for the Byzantine economy. The massive loss of life resulted in a severe labor shortage, disrupting agricultural production and trade networks. The economic repercussions were devastating, plunging the empire into a spiral of decline and instability. One of the most significant impacts of the plague was its devastating effect on the Byzantine military. The substantial reduction in population led to a shortage of soldiers, weakening the empire's capacity to defend its borders and protect its citizens. The once mighty army of Justinian was depleted, hindering his ambitious plans for reconquering the western provinces of the old Roman Empire. The plague's toll on the military was a critical factor that contributed to the empire's vulnerability during this period. As the plague continued to persist, historians estimate that it claimed between 25 and 50 million lives over 2 centuries of recurring outbreaks. Its impact transcended geographical boundaries, spreading across the Mediterranean and beyond. The Black Sea, North Africa, and Western Asia were among the regions most affected by the plague's wrath. The plague's persistence was a testament to its resilience and adaptability. Despite the best efforts of medical practitioners and public health officials, the disease continued to circulate among human and animal populations. The bacteria's ability to survive and thrive in various environments contributed to its longevity, making it a formidable adversary for the societies of the time. It's important to note that the Justinian Plague, while severe, differed from the more notorious Black Death, which occurred in Europe in the mid-14th century. Though caused by the same bacterium, the two outbreaks were distinct events with different characteristics and consequences. The Black Death is remembered for its higher death toll and its profound impact on European society and history. Justinian's dream of reviving the Roman Empire was dealt a severe blow by the plague. His ambitious Reconquista campaigns were hindered by the weakened state of his military and economy, forcing him to scale back his goals. The plague had drained the empire's resources and manpower, making large-scale conquests unsustainable. As the plague raged on, Justinian's rule was challenged by internal strife and external threats. Rebellions and usurpations became more frequent, exploiting the instability created by the disease. The plague had not only devastated the population, but also sown seeds of discontent and unrest. Furthermore, the plague's impact on trade and commerce had significant consequences for the Byzantine economy. The labor shortages and disruptions in supply chains led to inflation and economic instability. The once prosperous cities were now grappling with poverty and widespread unemployment. The plague's economic repercussions were felt throughout the empire, undermining the foundations of its financial prosperity. In retrospect, the Justinian Plague stands as a stark reminder of the fragility of civilizations in the face of infectious diseases. The plague's ability to decimate entire populations and cripple societies serves as a cautionary tale for future generations. It underscores the importance of public health measures, scientific advancements, and global cooperation in combating infectious diseases. As the dust settled on the ravaged lands of the Byzantine Empire, the survivors were left to pick up the pieces of their shattered world. The Justinian Plague had not only taken millions of lives, but it also indelibly altered the course of history. The plague's impact on the Byzantine Empire was profound and long-lasting. The massive loss of life had a devastating effect on the empire's population, economy, and military, leaving it weakened and vulnerable. Additionally, the plague's persistence over 2 centuries created a sense of fear and uncertainty that permeated through society. The Justinian Plague often takes a back seat to the more famous Black Death when discussing pandemics, but it deserves equal recognition for its immense impact on world history. Its ability to devastate one of the ancient world's most powerful empires serves as a testament to its ferocity and far-reaching consequences. As we reflect on the horrors of the Justinian Plague, let us remember not only the countless lives lost, but also the resilience of the human spirit in the face of adversity. The bravery of those who cared for the sick and the efforts to understand and combat the disease offer a glimmer of hope in the darkest of times. May the lessons learned from this devastating pandemic continue to guide us as we strive to create a healthier and more resilient future for generations to come.